Hey everyone, Alistair here. Hope you're doing okay. The summer months are upon us, which means two things. I need to wear more hats, and this is the part of our year when costs are high and support tends to dip. We know, believe me, things are tight everywhere at the moment, and unfortunately, that includes us. For those of you who support us already, thank you so much. We hope you're enjoying the great new Cats Cast episodes and all the Pseudopod extrusions. If you don't support us, but you would like to join them, we've got tons of options for you at both Patreon and PayPal. Even a one-off at Ko-fi makes a big difference. Or, if you're in the market for some sweet new summer wardrobe, we have a new swag store, courtesy of our amazing friends over at Void Merch, and the t-shirts are unbelievably great. It all adds up, it all helps. And it all helps us bring you the best in free audio fiction every week. So, if you can help out, please do. And thanks. And do enjoy this week's episode.
Escape Pod, Episode 848, An Incident on Ishtar, by Brian Trent.
Hello, and welcome to Escape Pod, your weekly science fiction podcast. I'm Valerie Valdez, your host for this episode. Our story this week is An Incident on Ishtar by Brian Trent. It was first published by Analog Science Fiction and Fact in March 2018. Brian Trent's fiction appears regularly in Analog, the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, the year's best military and adventure sci-fi, daily science fiction, Nature, and numerous years' best anthologies. His novel Red Space Rising, published in September 2022, is set in the same universe as An Incident on Ishtar and involves some of the same characters. Brian lives in New England. His website and blog are located at briantrent.com. Our narrator, Kitty Sarkozy, is a speculative fiction writer, actor, and robot girlfriend. Kitty is an alumnus of Superstars Writing Seminar, a member of the Apex Writers Group, and the Horror Writers Association. Several large cats allow her to live with them in Marietta, Georgia, and she enjoys tending the extensive gardens where she hides the bodies. For a list of her publications, acting credits, or to engage her services on your next project, go to kittysarkozy.com. Now, get ready to discover how one big mistake can lead to another, because it's story time.
An Incident on Ishtar by Brian Trent, read by Kitty Sarkozy. Her family tried very hard to never use the word crazy with her, so therefore they didn't say it was crazy that she was applying for a Venusian post as Tier 3 balloon specialist. She tried explaining her reasons to them. I have valuable skill sets for the Ishtar colony. They countered, You don't do well with people. Her response, There are only 612 people throughout Ishtar's 9 modular habitats. There are 2.1 million people here in San Antonio. Venus is hell, Mom interjected. And you're afraid of heights, Melissa. Do you hear yourself? Venus is hell below the clouds, but I'll be living above them, sweeping along with the trans-terminator currents on oxygen-filled aerostat balloons that provide both breathable air and the lifting gases required. Statistically, it will be safer. No chance of making another terrible mistake. The smiling masks of her family fell away. Older sister Diane exploded at her. Is that what this is about? Are you out of your mind? Melissa didn't hear the rest. She marched out of her parents' house and took the nearest PDT to the local office of extraplanetary colony careers. Why do you want to go to Venus? The interviewer asked her. I have valuable skill sets for the Ishtar colony, she replied. They were quick to agree. Sailing Bright Quest from Earth, Melissa's mind found something enjoyable in linking the words Venus and Venetian. They sounded similar, and she liked Venice, having often hollowed toward the floating city with the people option switched off, so she could enjoy exploring the grid of canals, marble piazzas, twisting back streets, and bridges without distraction. It seemed appropriate, too, because she knew that Venus would wear a mask. She imagined it as a scarlet harlequin mask from Carnival, sleek and sly and patterned in checkerboard prints. She met her fellow Venusian colonists, masks bolted over unknown layers of limbic trophospheres and emotional thermospheres. She was assigned E909, a single room in Diem Kies with a green door. Each morning she walked the connecting corridor to what they called Starburst Road because it radiated out from Ishtar's central main base into each modular Diem. Each evening she walked that same route home. She liked the diamond patterns of the floor tiles. She worked in the teleoperations office, M212, cream-colored door, planning the deployment and retrieval of surface excavations. The Venusian floor, as they called the hostile surface, had become something similar to ancient pulp adventure stories. Metal monsters now crawled over the world, or drank from its toxic seas, or wormed into the molten flesh to chew at the bones of the planet, extracting valuables for the colony's manufacturing hub. The robot monsters had neat, rotating stomachs, like a cow's mini-chambered belly. Once each chamber was filled to bursting, balloons would deploy and the robots would be lifted into the furious tempest. Taking the routes, Melissa was in charge of plotting. Each morning she studied the meteorological reports. Venus's sky was very much like an ocean, with currents and riptides, lattices of data revealing a shoal of storm cells here, a lonely hurricane there, and the many-necked tornadoes would stretch like flailing tentacles horizontally with the planet's spin. Melissa would tabulate, calculate, estimate, and execute to avoid these airy pitfalls. E909, M212. The cafeteria for meals. Walks along the Starburst Road. She liked the dependable patterns. She even sent an unusually verbose email to her parents and sister. "Hello, Mom and Dad and Diane. I am happy here. Hope you are well. Melissa." And then, 6 months later, with routine established and no mistakes, certainly nothing on the order of the terrible mistakes she'd made on Earth, she went to work one day and made another terrible mistake. This one involved a monster. The assembly hall erupted in fury, all civilized masks discarded to show bared teeth, wild eyes, and complexions the hue of near strangulation. Like a pair of immense storm cells colliding, feeding off of each other's energies and furious vortices. The two sides of the debate had been arguing for the better part of an hour now. Melissa entered the room quietly, navigating the currents of rage until she could see the besieged colonial governor, Ali Waltari, resident of room 100A, Blue Door, standing at the podium. Melissa took a deep breath. "Excuse me, may I have permission to turn night into day?" She knew her small voice would never be heard in this tumult, but somehow her question laced through the brief dip in the rabble's volume. Everything seemed to freeze in nightmarish snapshot. Melissa figured she was having one of her moments. When she was scared, her thoughts sometimes collapsed into a kind of slushy ice, halting the passage of time, like the universe at absolute zero. Governor Watari leaned over the podium, her spiked blonde hair forming a leonine mane around her head. "Dr. Lobo, did you say something?" "I did," Melissa muttered, blushing furiously. "May I have permission to reconfigure the solar array, to turn night into day?" Several beats of silence. "The solar array?" the governor repeated. Someone coughed. "Yes," Melissa said. "Please." The crowd murmured, and there was some snickering. Even the governor didn't seem to know what to say. And as that surreal limbo threatened to stretch on forever, there was suddenly a flash of docking lights. Ishtar's AI intoned pleasantly. Deem Amtor is commencing reattachment. All heads turned towards the room's only window, an enormous rectangle. The viewport looked out on the Venusian horizon. Cloud tops whipped past like whitewater rapids, creamy and frothy and silken. Navigating those airy currents, another of Ishtar's modular stations was preparing to dock. Lights blinking, docking claws extended like scorpion pincers in the 184-mile-per-hour gale. Separated from the main base in advance of the hypercane, the substation now slid noisily back into place. Piece by piece, Ishtar Colony was reconstituting itself. Reattachment is complete, the station AI announced merrily. Someone in the crowd snarled, It isn't complete. Where is Deem Kias? Governor, why don't you just admit that it crashed? That your decision resulted in the loss of 41 people who... The governor smacked her steel gavel against the podium. Dr. Lobo currently has the floor. She was asking for permission to reconfigure the solar array, Melissa said quickly. Absolutely, Melissa. Ishtar's governor seemed to seize on the peace afforded by this bizarre interruption. You go right ahead and run whatever experiment you like. As for the rest of this discussion, the woman rose, gavel in hand. I understand that you are upset, angry, and frightened. So am I. We just survived the worst storm in human history, and 41 of our fellow colonists are missing. We are investigating. Let us reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m. The crowd reluctantly trickled out. Melissa tried cutting ahead of them, and her heart fell when the governor called behind her. Dr. Lobo, would you mind hanging back for a moment? I'd like to speak with you. The Venusian cloud tops showed no hint of Hypercane Larry's destructive passing. Only the usual surge of atmospheric superrotation was churning past the windows, while Ishtar held position 48 kilometers above the planetary floor. It was the night week, and Earth was the brightest jewel in the Venusian filament. Ordinarily, the colony swept along with the superrotation, experiencing day-night cycles of 96 hours at a time, but now the colony was fixed in place, while they reassembled, thrusters holding them steady against the relentless wind. Governor Waltari's leonine hairstyle framed a tired face. I'm sure you didn't mean to, Melissa, but your weird little outburst actually helped me. The woman pursed her lips. So I suppose a thank you is in order. Melissa shrugged and strode to the door. Wait, the governor said, and Melissa sighed. Between the fury of the storm and the near mutiny of the colonists in its aftermath, the day had been confusing enough without her having to navigate the nuances of social interaction. Especially when time was running out. The governor rounded the podium. Your team was first to identify the hypercane. It wasn't a question, nor was it accurate. Melissa had noticed the storm in its embryonic state, sitting there amid the data of a regular meteorological report. She had reported it to her supervisor. It hadn't been a team discovery. It had been hers. We haven't really had time to meet, have we? Waltari extended her hand. Not formally. Melissa took the proffered hand. I'm curious, Dr. Lobo. What did you think of my decision to break Ishtar apart? It was the correct decision. You really think so? I do. The decision had been one for the history books. Ordinarily, Ishtar's aerostat facilities swept along with the planet's trans-terminator flow. But when Hypercane Larry arose like a mythical leviathan to pursue them, the governor decided to fix them in place, separating and scattering the station into its 9 modular demes to let Larry blow past. Your decision to separate the demes increased odds of overall colony survival, Melissa said, stealing a glance to the door where she wanted to be. But Deem Kias is MIA. Dean Keyes didn't crash. The governor blinked. But it's nowhere to be found. The other 8 Deems are accounted for, but Keyes is gone. Gone from visuals, from LADAR, from VPS. $85 billion worth of material, and 41 colonists missing in the wake of the storm. She rubbed her hands, seeming to age in place. Maybe the others are right. Maybe Keyes crashed, and it's down there on the surface, melting in 900 degrees temperatures. Heat rushed to Melissa's face. It did not crash. 500 tons striking the surface would have sent ejecta up like a geyser. We would have seen it. I'm sorry, Shut up! Melissa was sweating. Look at this. Just look! She was wearing her hologloves from the lab, and she used them now to patch into the station web and conjure an image of the colony into the air between her and the governor. It was a boilerplate image, the main base as nexus for a rotating wheel of the 9 substations. Though there was some overlap and redundancy, each Deem was devoted to a specific necessity of colonial life. Some handled teleoperations for surface mining, balloon maintenance and deployment, food production, microbiology research, meteorological analysis, and, in the case of Keyes, ballistic minerals for manufacturing. Melissa's hands moved swiftly, inputting the planet's average weather conditions. She grabbed the hollow of Ishtar, like an odd morsel poised between her gloved fingertips, and then hurled it onto the floor. The Deem impacted like a meteor, a plume climbing toward the assembly hall ceiling, bending along with the digitized super-rotation like an incandescent tree, being slowly ripped up by the roots. Storm or no storm? Melissa said, her color returning to normal. Her angry expression reverting to its default blankness. VPS satellites would have detected that. The governor was silent, staring at the balloon technician for a long while. You're right, of course, but that still begs the question, where is it? I'm starting to think that... Melissa didn't stay to continue the conversation. She had secured permission to run her experiment. And time was running out. She had made the terrible mistake, and time was running out to fix it. The door slid apart, and she hurried along the drafty corridor to the merciful quiet and comfort of her laboratory. They're playing it cool right now, but the IPC is shitting bricks, and my Blue World contact says the chiefs of staff have been behind closed doors for 7 hours now. The Sargon has mysteriously left lunar orbit. Might even be in the neighborhood if they send it to where the storm first showed up. So yes, things are about to get real. Venus is the key to everything. Deem Keyes represented 30% of raw material production for the Bright Worlds. The IPC will send an entire fleet to help search for it, and when they fail, they'll convert the rest of Ishtar into a replacement hub. They can't afford to drag their feet. Every projection shows the next 10 years belong to the Asteroid Federation. That we will eclipse total Bright World production of precious metals and helium-3 and every other goddamn thing to become the economic powerhouse in Sol System. The AF is on the doorstep of independence. They just lack the stones. I know, funny. The window for opportunity is here. Okay, gotta go. I'll be in touch once we have better intel on the fleet. Do you know what people used to say when ending a conversation? Peace. Coffee. 2 sugars. 3 creams. Still wearing her hollow gloves, Melissa stirred her mug and watched the black liquid flush to caramel brown. It hadn't taken long to set up the array's reconfiguration. She opened as many view screens as the panel would allow. They were crammed together like soap bubbles, competing for every inch of available space. She sipped her coffee, measuring the stale cream and the underlying bitterness of imported Arabica. A new screen suddenly hatched and swelled, pushing the others out of the way like an immense blister. Melissa was suddenly staring into the face of Security Chief Tristan McCumber. Dr. Lobo, he began. Handsome, with a puff of beard on the tip of his chin, he smiled awkwardly and said, "Can I ask what you're doing?" Melissa lowered her coffee. "I have permission." "Uh-huh." The screen was brightening, and the security chief squinted in the white light flooding his office, the orbital array angling its panels to channel sunlight into Ishtar's general vicinity. He glanced dubiously towards his window. "Sorry," Melissa said. "I only need the solar array for an hour or so." "That's fine, but next time, Dr. Lobo, can you remember to alert me first? I'd just like to know we're not being cooked alive in the middle of a night week." A joke. He was probably making a joke. Melissa hoisted a smile onto her face. "I promise I am not cooking you alive." "Glad to hear it, Doctor." He hesitated. "Are you okay?" She swallowed a bitterness that wasn't coming from the coffee. "I made a terrible mistake. I need to fix it." Macomber's forehead creased. She realized that her hands were shaking, and she hid them behind her back. "Anything I can do to help?" "Time is running out. Time is running out. Time is running out." "No, thank you." "Time is running out. Time is running out." She disconnected the call, blotting her sweaty hands dry on her pants. The security screen fell back into the panel like a flower closing up for the night. The other screens expanded in its absence. Someone whistled behind her, and Melissa turned to see Umara Javed, teleoperations specialist, lives in room 818, green door. Leaning casually in the doorway, grinning at her. "Someone has a boyfriend." "He is not my boyfriend," Melissa insisted. The woman shrugged. "Last I heard, he's single, and last I saw, he's cute." A leggy, striking woman with black curls dangling around a coffee-colored face of unusual loveliness, Umara was part of the teleoperations team. The B team, as they were referred to, since they were in charge of bringing recovered materials from the Venusian surface via balloons like large orange bees bearing pollen to the hive. Umara sat down beside her, propping her booted feet on the panel. "Don't take this the wrong way, but if I were placing bets on who might shout down our lofty governor, it would never have been you." Melissa stiffened. The woman laughed, showing bright teeth and twinkling eyes. "Sorry, I was eavesdropping. You're not the first person to yell at the alley cat. Just the first one to have succeeded in getting her to back down." "Parsley." Umara raised her eyebrow. "Excuse me?" Melissa blushed, took a quick sip of her coffee to cover her embarrassment. "Sorry." She adjusted another knob on the board, refining the array's configuration. Silence gathered in the teleoperations room. Melissa enjoyed silence. Growing up, she often thought of her sister Diane as a noisy miniature tornado. Always talking, humming, whistling, laughing, or crying. It was a habit that had not ebbed through adulthood. Umara, however, probably subscribed to Diane's theory of human interaction. Barely 2 minutes had passed when the woman suddenly leaned forward, so close that Melissa could smell the delicate splash of perfume on her neckline. "Listen," the woman whispered. "This is none of my business, but maybe you should take the next shuttle out of here, Mel." "Why?" "We're in a dangerous spot right now." Melissa frowned. "Hypercane Larry is on the other side of the planet, and as long as we resume our drift in the next few hours, it will pose no threat to us." Umara stared at her. "That's not what I'm referring to. Do you really not know what's going on?" Melissa said nothing. Her visitor hesitated, as if considering how to make a delicate point. Then she poured herself a cup of coffee. No sugar, no cream. "So," Umara said at last, apparently deciding not to press on with her previous line of discussion. "What are you doing anyway?" "Reconfiguring the solar array." "Isn't that a little outside your area?" "A little," Melissa conceded, "but solar radiation can affect balloon navigations." The array itself had begun life as a very different project. The IPC Colonization Board had deployed immense shields to block the sun and plunge Venus into perpetual darkness. The idea had been to reduce the hellish temperature, allowing for planetary remediation and eventually surface settlements. The deployment arrays were positioned around the bright world to gauge the idea's viability. But the plan was quickly trashed when it was pointed out that in terms of cost, time, safety, and productivity, aerostat colonization was the only option that made any sense. Sky estate was the way to go. The deployment arrays, however, were still in place, and these were hastily converted into solar arrays. Thanks to the trans-terminator flow, Ishtar's night was 4 days long. Access to the orbital arrays was allowed to drive sunlight to where the various colonies needed it, mostly for gardening purposes. "Did you have lunch yet, Melissa?" "I will have lemon chicken, saffron rice, and pudding at 1:15 p.m. "I see." A pause. "Can I ask you something? How can you be so sure that DMKS didn't crash? It's not showing up on radar or satellite." Melissa darkened. "DMKS did not crash." "But everyone else is convinced it did not crash." Umara held up her hands in parley and started to say something when suddenly one of the panel screens expanded and began flashing. The display was set to detect and report on any significant thermal changes in the surrounding atmosphere. Ordinarily, there was nothing to detect above the typical background range. Now, however, a shape was appearing on the thermal view, a glowing blob that quickly assumed a distinct silhouette. A shape in the clouds some 9,000 meters to the west of Ishtar and about 1,000 meters below it. Umar appeared at the monitor. "What the hell is that?" Melissa was already heading towards the door. But she had been asked a question, and she knew it was rude not to answer. "That," she said, "is DMKS." She went into the hallway while her visitor exclaimed in disbelief, "What?" The presiding authority of Ishtar stood with her retina before a giant glowing real-time hologram of the thermal imaging feed. The woman's heliophalic haircut framed a face battle-scarred with anxiety, exhaustion, and now a splash of hope. The holo showed a crescent-shaped blur, like a smudge on an X-ray plate. Deep within, soupy sulfuric acid clouds to the southwest. Governor Waltare strode through the hologram, the light washing across her spiked hair like a supernova. "How did you do this, Dr. Lobo?" Impatiently, thinking of parsley, Melissa said, "I turned the solar array into a gigantic, high-powered searchlight, a heat light to be more accurate. Then I just used it to make a sweep of the clouds. The deams have metallic holes, so when metal heats up," she pointed to the blurred shape in the hologram. The governor didn't seem to know what to say. "What made you think of taking this approach?" She turned to Security Chief Tristan McCumber. "Your thoughts?" McCumber frowned, and he stuck his hand into the scintillating light. "We don't know for sure this is DMKS, Governor." Melissa said, "There is nothing else it could be. We're looking at something large and metal and suspended in the atmosphere, which means its balloon is still functioning. It's DMKS." "Then why the hell isn't it showing up on the radar?" the chief demanded. To make his point, he switched the hologram to an oval-shaped gray space. Radar signals pinged out from Ishtar in steady waves. Tiny blips flared, indicating the position of weather balloons and convoys. But the DMKS, if that's what Melissa had indeed found, was absent. The governor nodded. "It's a good question, Melissa." Melissa was silent. She glanced at the window, envisioning the substation lurking within the darker, faster-flowing clouds behind them. "I don't know," she muttered. The security chief continued, "And why haven't they responded to our hails? We've been broadcasting for 2 hours asking them to report in." "Magnetic particulate in the atmosphere might be interfering with communication and radar," Melissa suggested, not really believing it. "We won't know until I get aboard." Governor Walteri blinked. "When you get aboard? Melissa, I'm sending Tristan and his team to visually confirm your findings." "I found the station," Melissa insisted. rocked by new waves of panic. And we thank you for that, but this is a job for Tristan's team. They're... Thinking fast, Melissa said. The balloon stabilization has been compromised. That's the only explanation for why it's sitting so low in the clouds. Tristan's frown turned darker. You just told us that the balloon was working properly. I didn't want to panic anyone. You didn't want to panic anyone? Timothy, hey. The security chief gaped at her. What? Timothy, what? Melissa stammered, fighting to collect her thoughts. If the storm tore the balloon, lifting gas leakage is the only thing that can account for a descent of this magnitude. Macomber was unmoved. The spiders will take care of it, he said with a shrug. Time is running out, time is running out, time is running out. True, Melissa stalled, daring to meet his gaze. Unless the spiders were already working on the breach at the height of the storm, at which time Hypercane Larry might have flung them into the sky. If I'm correct, then the station will continue descending until it really does crash. Governor Waltari paled. We can't have that. Melissa will accompany you. Governor, Tristan protested. We need all the help we can get, but the IPC is sending a fleet to take control of Ishtar. Fleet? What fleet? Melissa asked, shocked. She looked from one frightened face to another. To aid our recovery, Waltari went on, her voice stretched thinly over abject dread. Do all of you understand the position we're in? If they get here and we're still missing the biggest manufacturing hub, Ishtar gets militarized. I'm talking garrisons, reappropriations of all facilities and resources, the end of our sovereignty as long as the AF is deemed a threat. Tristan looked to the floor. So, basically forever. Melissa waited for them to say more, but they didn't. I don't understand, she managed. I found Deem Kias. Let's get it back. The room settled into a pained silence. Even the holo reverted to the news feed that had been playing when Melissa arrived to report her findings. A ticker at the bottom of the holo showed news from Earth. But the news was still all about Venus. Venus in the hot seat. Colonists still missing. Walteri's pallor flushed scarlet as she read the ticker. And we need to know who the hell leaked this news. I had the entire colony on calm blackout. Except for Kias, Melissa pointed out. The governor stared at her. Except for Kias, right? Go with the security team. Get that Deem back. Just calm the fuck down. Yes, they located the station. Someone turned the solar array into a kind of searchlight, and the damn thing popped up on sensors. How? Because despite the dark sleeve aura, the station is still made of fucking metal, that's how. Bottom line, they know Kias is out there now. No, don't move it. As long as they still think it's an accident, they'll play it by the book. Besides, they're keeping the solar array trained on it now. If it starts zipping around in the clouds, I think that'll look suspicious, don't you? What? Absolutely not. I don't know who's responsible for finding it, and it doesn't actually matter. Keeping Kias off the grid was a temporary bid, just to draw the IPC into orbit. And the FAR scan shows that the IPCS Sargon is en route with 3 additional battleships, a target far juicier than we hoped. Just remind the Dark Fleet that when they strike, they go in hard and fast. And if possible, try not to hit Ishtar. We're going to have a problem with debris raining down anyway. Really don't need antimatter batteries detonating in this atmosphere. Every colonist owned a biosuit, issued upon immigration to the station. Melissa's had hung like a starchy effigy in her closet. She had never worn it, and as she slid into its cream-colored sleeves, she felt a distinct throb of pang. She checked the O2 tank 6 times, before finally stepping into the corridor leading to the shuttle bay and airlock, and running straight into tech specialist Umara Javed. The woman had been in the midst of knocking, and she recoiled from the violence of the door opening. Dr. Lobo? I was just... She trailed off, looking her up and down. Why are you dressed like that? I'm going to Deem Kias. Don't be ridiculous. Let the security team handle it. I have to be there. Why? Why do you care? Melissa demanded, brushing past the woman and marching down the corridor to the shuttle bay. Umara sprinted to keep pace with her. She looked hurt. I thought we were becoming friends. No one wants to be friends with me. Want to know what everyone calls me behind my back? Robo Lobo. The girl with no emotions. I never heard anyone call you that. Melissa swallowed hard, embarrassed and awkward and uncertain. You wouldn't understand. The day you arrived on Ishtar, I was working in the shuttle bay. A balloon had gotten caught in a tether and needed repairs fast, so I was overseeing the project on the spot. I saw you march down the gangplank. People looked at you and smiled. They liked you on sight because of your looks and smile and confidence. In a week, you were the most popular person here. Umara's smile faded. Where I come from, it's important to strike alliances and ingratiate yourself with the locals. So, it's tactical? The woman hesitated. Even so, Melissa continued, if you lose a friend, you have 1,000 more. I only have one friend in the universe, and I made a terrible mistake on Earth, and I made another terrible mistake, and it's my fault, and I promised her nothing bad would ever happen to her. I promised her. I don't understand. Melissa swallowed hard, feeling the violent start of panic like thunder in her head. Dr. Lobo? Melissa! Like the day in the street, the traffic flying past, Melissa froze in place, unable to do anything. Robo Lobo is on the fritz. The day of the terrible mistake, she had stood like a statue, like a malfunctioning automaton, watching the cars scream past just as she was screaming in her head, telling herself to cross the street. The panic had frozen her in place. Tech specialist Javed touched her face. Parsley? Melissa's wildly flailing thoughts locked into the image of emerald waves and paler stalks. There's none left, she muttered. Her legs broke through the paralyzing web. A moment later, she was running so quickly that the overhead lights seemed to strobe past. Shuttle Bay, I-10, red doors. Lights were already flashing around the airlock. The last of McCumber's security team was stepping aboard the Bombay model shuttle when Melissa entered, and she broke into a flat-out dash across the hangar, puffing in her suit so that her visor temporarily fogged. When she finally settled into her seat, she was wheezing. There were 6 members of the security team already seated, gazing at her in curiosity. Chief McCumber was in the pilot seat. His hands moved across the instrument panel. The klaxons rang out around them, and Melissa felt the vibrations of the docking ring releasing. The hangar doors swung open beneath them. Since Ishtar was still acting as a buffer, the cloud tops beyond the glassed windows were a stunning sight. Venusian winds beat visibly around the massive station, insulating a pocket of calm like a force field in the midst of an alien maelstrom. The shuttle dropped from the hangar. Melissa felt her stomach lurch into her throat. Their fall was arrested a moment later, when the shuttle thrusters kicked on and McCumber rotated the craft, turning its nose towards the dark clouds where the missing Deem lurked. Melissa felt a new ripple of panic snake through her, but she thought again of Parsley. The paralysis alighted on her briefly, like cold fingers tickling her arms and legs, and then was gone. The shuttle eased forward and dipped below Ishtar's protection. The wind struck like a hurtling train. Melissa shut her eyes and thought of doors. Red doors and green doors and blue doors and cream doors. The shuttle thrusters cracked as they fought to keep the craft steady. When she opened her eyes again, the cabin door was sliding open, and Tristan tapped one of his fellow officers to replace him at the helm. The man hopped up, leaving his seat open for the chief. But McCumber didn't take the seat. To Melissa's surprise and consternation, he walked to the shuttle's main door, the same sky blue as the shuttle itself, and drew it aside. Wind screamed across the gap like a banshee. "That's dangerous," Melissa said, finding her voice. "Chief, you shouldn't do that." He turned from the view of clouds and storms, of light and dark and wind and steam. Behind his faceplate, he glared at her. "I don't want this, goddammit," he snapped. You're a goddamn balloon technician. You had no business at all joining a security run. Melissa stared blankly. I don't... Her eyes flinched to the others. Half the men regarded her coolly. Half didn't meet her eyes at all. Her gaze returned to the chief, and she gasped when she realized he had drawn his service pistol, its muzzle aimed in her direction. Get up, Tristan ordered. Are you going to kill me? She asked, unable to make sense of what was happening. Was it a joke? Was this flirting? You're in the middle of a war zone, you stupid bitch. His face flushed to a scarlet pallor. We're luring the Sargon and the other battleships to Venus. There's a dark fleet waiting to spring on them. All of us here, he indicated his compatriots, will be lost during this mission to disincline the governor from sending further teams. In fact, you sort of inspired the way we're going to cover our tracks. Once we're aboard Chios, we're sending this shuttle on a nosedive to the surface. Sending up a nice, what did you call it? Ejectoplume, right? Everyone will think we're dead. Melissa stammered, trying to parse what he was saying. Why doesn't the station show up on radar? Our Asteroid Federation friends smuggled a dark sleeve for the Deem. When Hypercane Larry hit, it was the perfect opportunity to set everything in motion. He looked sidelong at her. You know, others figured we could take you aboard Chios with us, but my argument is that you're a completely unpredictable risk. Take me aboard Chios, she pleaded. That's all I want. That's the whole reason I even looked for the Deem. Please, just let me go to my room and... Why did you look for it? Tristan snarled. You don't fucking talk to anyone. You don't give two shits about the politics around here. So none of us expected that you, of all people, would swiftly undo a year-long plan in just minutes. Why? What the hell gives? Melissa felt tears spring to her eyes. Athena. She's in my room by herself. The food must be gone by now, and she must be so scared. His jaw dropped. Are you crazy? You interfered in this because of a stupid... She didn't know what impelled her next move. The impulse erupted in sheer defiance of the threat of his pistol. Maybe it was that he called her crazy. Or that he might hurt Athena now that he knew that she was still on Chios. She threw herself at the security chief, grabbing his weapon. Tristan easily sidestepped her novice attack. A moment later, he had her arms twisted behind her back, the weapon pointed at her faceplate. He was strong. Melissa could barely budge as he marched her to the open door. Wait, please. Goodbye, Dr. Lobo. Cloudfoot, she screamed. Cloudfoot! And then she was shoved out into the dark Venusian sky. Diane stood in the doorway of her bedroom, fighting back tears as she watched Melissa pack. I'm sorry I called you crazy, her sister said. You didn't call me crazy. You said I was out of my mind. But Mel, just listen, okay? You can't move to another planet because your pet rabbit almost got hit by a car. That doesn't make sense. There are no cars on Venus. Diane growled and paced in a circle. Listen, you left the back door open and Athena got out. But she's okay. You got her back. Melissa's hands trembled as she zipped up the luggage compartments. She hadn't gotten Athena back from the concrete island in the middle of the busy street. She'd been too scared, too frozen in place. She had been afraid to thread the blur of steel traffic, afraid that even if she could get her feet to move, little Athena might run at her and be squished, or run away and be squished. So no, Melissa had just stood on the sidewalk like a statue, like a malfunctioning robot. Robo-Lobo on the fritz. It had been Diane who marched out into traffic to rescue Athena. Diane, who could have been hit by a car doing that. Diane, who brought the scared little bunny back because Diane was normal and perfect and beautiful and apparently courageous too. I'm useless, Melissa thought, zipping up the final suitcase. I'm the girl who builds weather drones, who aces every school test, but who is not cut out for this world. Her sister let out a strangled sob. Please don't leave us, Mel. I have valuable skill sets for the Ishtar colony. Venus is hell. I'll be living in the clouds. Melissa met her sister's gaze in a rare moment of eye contact. "It'll be okay." Her sister managed a small, sad smile, despite the tears. "I'm going to call you Melissa Cloudfoot from now on." Melissa screamed as she plunged into the black clouds, knowing that her suit was not designed for the 900-degree heat that awaited her. Already smoke was curling from her biosuit sleeves and chest plate and the molding of her visor. Bubbles blistered up from her gloves. The Cloudfoot command leapt from Melissa's biosuit comlink, bounced off the orbital satellite array, and activated the shoal of weather balloons below Ishtar Station. She was plummeting through an especially green cloud when she slammed into a rising balloon, like a trapeze artist caught by an airy cushion. The rubbery surface rippled out around her. Melissa lay still, her heart pounding in her chest. When she found her voice, she whispered, "Uplink request. Lobo. Melissa." In her left eye, a frost blue icon appeared. She selected it with a blink, and abruptly had control of the weather balloon's nav computer. She set her coordinates to where Kias lurked, and the balloon whisked her off in that direction. The lower clouds offered zero visibility. Melissa was fumbling with her wrist light when the weather balloon impacted something vast and pliable. The collision stunned the craft, and she pitched forward, striking the rubbery, springy resistance of the aerostat support balloon. The aerostat balloon, as seen by the mint glow of her wrist light, was a staggering sight, thick, rubbery, and pale, like the bladder of some Venetian monster from old sci-fi tales. Melissa pressed her gloved hands against it, while the weather balloon beneath her continued thumping and fighting to hold steady in the buffeting winds. "How will you get inside? You forgot to bring a knife, idiot." Her biosuit was now smoking from every seam, not long before it ruptured. She fought to stay ahead of her swelling panic. Couldn't afford to freeze now. Aerostat balloons weren't something she could pry apart with her hands, but there might be another option. "Access drill bay," she said. The weather balloon contained replacement parts for malfunctioning surface drill bots. The contraption vibrated beneath her as the compartment door slid open. Melissa blindly reached in, the smoke from her suit curling around her as if she was on fire. She found what she was seeking, a diamond-headed spade, large enough that she needed 2 hands to jab it into the support balloon and puncture the material. In minutes, she was squeezing through the breach, warm air gushing around her as she wormed her way inside. In the pitch dark within, her wrist lights glinted off spider bots that were scuttling past her, their spinnerets already concocting the threading and patches needed to repair the damage. They clustered around the hull and set to work. Melissa ran, bouncing, falling, bouncing again, like a child in an inflatable castle. Her wrist lights splashed on industrial rivets and maintenance hatches, running beneath Kias. She worked her way to hatch K5. Melissa cracked the hatch wheel, and a moment later she was climbing up into the substation. She hastily shed her biosuit and abandoned it, steaming and dissolving, in a maintenance closet. It was only a short walk to the common array from there. She didn't understand half of what she was transmitting. She only repeated what Macumber had told her, about the Darksleeve fleet, about the planned timing of battleship arrivals, about how Kias had been rendered a stealth station. And while she didn't know precisely where the IPCS Sargon was, she figured that a wideband transmission would find its way to the battleship's attention. "Tristan, you disappoint me. I told you to leave Dr. Lobo alone. I said, take her prisoner if you had to. I'm not certain how you interpret that order as, I'm going to throw her out of the fucking shuttle. She's not the problem. Your stubborn insistence on doing things your way is the problem. So, look around you now. You're in the detention center of the IPCS Sargon. Kias has been captured and returned to Ishtar. Our dark fleet is high-tailing it out of orbit because the game is up. The element of surprise is gone." "What?" "Yeah, I bet you have a headache. Long day. And the IPC has you scheduled for a full mind scan to ferret out your co-conspirators. I've seen the scans work. It's ugly business, my friend. They'll pull my name, and the names of the others, right out of your head, synapsis by synapsis." "Say again?" "No, I'm not going to pursue vengeance against the good doctor. She had everything stacked against her, and yet she still outmaneuvered us. I respect that. Where I'm from, you don't punish that kind of resourcefulness. You step back and admire it. Headache getting worse? No, it's not stress, Tristan. There's a nanobot in your head, about to blend your gray matter into a useless soup. Not as elegant as a cyanide capsule, but honestly, I wouldn't trust you to swallow it anyway. Goodbye. You. You're sure everything is okay? Melissa sat on her sofa, facing the hollow terminal's projection of her sister's face. It was optimal calm time between Venus and Earth, with messages pinging back and forth at just 3 minutes each way. Everything is okay, she replied. In fact, things were better than okay. The 6-minute communication delay worked fine for Melissa. Instead of a flurry of rapid-fire dialogue from her sister, things were slowed to a gentle, manageable pace. She sighed, petting the little rabbit sitting in her lap. If Athena had been scared during her terrible ordeal of loneliness, she wasn't showing it now. The rabbit sat very still, eyes half closed in contentment, as Melissa talked soothingly. You must have been so scared, with your food dish empty and your water bottle dry. You must have thought I abandoned you. She kissed the rabbit's furry head. I would never abandon you. When 6 minutes had passed, the hollow terminal ignited with Diane's newest diatribe of how Earth media was reporting some kind of conflict around Venus, and how much the Lobos missed their off-world daughter, and how Melissa might consider saying more than a handful of words given the transit time and the cost of these communications. Melissa continued to stroke her bunny's ears, and when Diana signed off, she sat there a while longer, letting the afternoon stretch into a tranquil quiet. At 6:15, she made dinner.
And that's our story. Brian has this to say about the story. An Incident on Ishtar is a story very near and dear to my heart, as it was written in the immediate aftermath of the death of a beloved pet. Knowing how upset I was, a friend of mine said, "Bri, you're a writer. Write her into a story." In addition to this, An Incident on Ishtar is set in the same universe as my novel Red Space Rising, which features the character of Umaira Javed in a prominent role, and which makes a sly reference to the events of this story at one point. When I first read this story, I spent the entire time wondering what big mistake the character could possibly have made that would send her to space. The reveal shook me. I was so relieved the bunny was okay in the end. And the humans too, of course. But mostly the bunny. Escape Pod is a production of Escape Artists Incorporated and is brought to you with a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license. Don't change it. Don't sell it. Please do share it. If you'd like to support Escape Pod, please rate or review us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite app. We are 100% audience supported, and we count on your donations to keep the lights on and the servers humming. You can now donate via 4 different platforms. On Patreon and Ko-fi, search for Escape Artists. On Twitch, we're at EA Podcasts. You can also use PayPal through our website, escapepod.org. Patreon subscribers have access to exclusive merchandise and can be automatically added to our Discord, where they can chat with other fans as well as our staff members. Our opening and closing music is by Daikaiju at daikaiju.org. And our closing quotation this week is from Richard Adams, who said, "You know how you let yourself think that everything will be all right if you can only get to a certain place or do a certain thing? But when you get there, you find it's not that simple." Thanks for joining us, and may your escape pod be fully stocked with stories.